First of all, they came out yesterday and were talking about pulling some people out of the old embassy there in Iraq. And so I guess with the trade talks that we had with Iran over the past weekend, actually Monday, they kind of left things on the table. Iran kind of threw it back in our face, saying, no, we're not going to do anything like that. And I guess based off of that, they were a little bit unsure on how things were going to go with Iran. Basically, they came back and said, we're just going to enrich uranium even faster now. And with that, they got a little worried about what's going to be happening over there in the Middle East. So they pretty much said, we need to start pulling back our personnel. The like, how do they put that? It's the ones that aren't important, quote unquote. And I don't know anybody overseas that represents the U.S. I would think would be important. But anyway, they're going to be pulling a lot of the people out of the embassy and stuff like that back. And with that, you can kind of see on the right side here is a crude oil chart. It just kind of jumped up all of a sudden. It's had a really, really hard time getting above 65 bucks, and it just kind of shot above there yesterday once that news came out, and they're still holding it up pretty well. So with that, the crude oil market's probably going to be a little heated. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't see $70 out of crude if this kind of continues on. We're supposed to be talking to him again this Sunday. Now, whether that is true or not, I don't know, but we'll see if that happens or not. So, but when Middle East gets a little touchy, crude oil has a tendency to kind of jump up a little bit, just because of the shipments and everything like that. That kind of goes around, put more demand on our crude that we can export. And with the draws that we've had, even yesterday on the EIA, we had a 3.5 million draw, even though we had a surplus in gasoline and the distillates, like heating oil and stuff like that, propanes and everything. Um, we still had a draw on crude. So uh, even though we had that surplus in the other ones, we still need crude oil to make gasoline and everything like that. Even though ethanol production has been in pretty high in production quite a bit here lately. We actually kind of had a record production. If you kind of look year over year, we actually produced about 500,000 barrels more in this past week than we did a year ago. So, but we're still at kind of lows just because of all the refinery shutdowns and everything like that that we're coming out of finally. So we'll just kind of keep our ear to the ground and kind of see how that goes along. And also with this week, I guess it's going to be kind of a Trump week. So, um, uh, the China deal's done. Everybody hear the China deal's done. No, it's not. All they did was to say, give us rare earths and we'll put the tariffs back to where they were, but we're still going to fight with you. So the deal's not done. They just got, tariffs kind of knocked back a little bit. And we got rare earth stuff coming into the automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis. So, yay, there it is. Um, but we get magnets and all kinds of stuff and the materials for that. So everybody's kind of happy about that. But the market really wasn't too impressed just because, well, that just kind of happened a week or so ago when they said, hey, no more, rare earth metals. And now we got it back. So they've already kind of got that cooked into the market, if you will. So we didn't get a whole lot of movement or excitement or anything like that. We have had no CPI and PPI come out, and both of those were below expectation. I'll put it that way. We still have basically 3% inflation on the PPI and 2.4% on the CPI. So we still have inflation. It's just not as much as they thought it was going to be. So we are still 2.4% higher than we were a year ago and 0.1% higher than we were a month ago. So it's still an increase in inflation. It's just not going as fast as it was like 8 or 7 or 6%, right? So things are still kind of expensive out there. Until we start getting negative CPI and PPI like Europe is actually having, which prices are actually coming down. I think that'll make people a whole lot happier once that starts happening, just because prices will decrease. Now, what does that do to the overall economy? Who knows? But right now. I mean, the big thing right now is kind of how are the tariffs really going to be? Even though jobs are still doing well, CPI and PPI are very well in check. So we haven't had this horrible inflation. All the quote unquote experts out there have been saying. We still have tariffs hanging out there, like in the steel industry, the aluminum industry, and stuff like that, that really hasn't had time to really go into the economy. I mean, you think about all the metal that's out there, go down the canned food aisle, metal cans, right? So even though the price of food might not go up, the price of the metal might. So you still might have an increase in our food just because of the containers that they're in. Not to put any fear in anybody, but just kind of sitting back and thinking, well, it's made out of metal, a lot of stuff, right? Um, but anyway, that's the one thing that we have to kind of keep an eye on as well. Um, and I don't know how this China deal is going to filter out, but at least they're shaking hands and saying, "Hey, come to my country and we'll have a little chat." So it's not tooth and nail, and that's a good thing. And I think that's where the markets are kind of or relaxed right now, going, "Whew, now we got away with that one." So the market's kind of floating up a little bit here and everything. Another thing that's kind of out there, they are, I don't know what those little committees are called over in Congress, but in one of the committees, they're actually okaying a bill for 2026 to kind of increase the fleets in Navy and Air Force. Here's steel and aluminum and stuff like that again, right? So, but they should start getting a bump out of that if that's the case. Now, granted, that's just in the committee and they've all approved that. Now it's got to go out to the floor and it's got to get chewed around. And then if they ever get anything passed off that, then it goes to the Senate and who knows what they change and back to the House and blah, 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 blah. It's a long process. But at least that they're thinking about increasing the fleets in the Navy and the Air Force. So we'll get more F-35s, and I assume I don't know what kind of ships they're looking for, or submarines or anything like that. But you'll probably see more steel and aluminum demand. Um, and one company that I kind of like in that industry there, uh, I don't know what it's doing today. I haven't had time to look at it, to be honest with you. Here it is. This is ATI. Um, and they work in that industry. And I think it'll be probably a good buy, even though the defense people will probably be pretty good. Um, but I think this one's probably going to be a real nice one just to kind of keep your eye on and see if it wants to continue to kind of move on up. See if they can't get above that 85 bucks and kind of take off and kind of move from there. But I think, with the steel and aluminum stuff and the demand from and that's a longer term play on it. It's not just, hey, let's jump into it today and see what it does over the next month. I mean, like I said, this is a 2026 bill, and with the tariffs and stuff like that, I think it's just kind of a longer term deal. And you can already see they've moved, from 45 up to, I mean, they've almost got them 100% since Liberation Day. So, but I think they can continue to move on with that if you hadn't caught anything along the way there. But that's the cool thing about it. But I think just like I said, it's kind of all Trump's kind of stuff that's kind of going on right now. We had World Ag Supply come out today, and the grain markets were pretty flat off that. I think the big focus on was kind of what Brazil's doing right now. They're in basically their second um, crop of corn. They don't have the storage facilities like we do here in the U.S. There it is, and so they're kind of focusing on that second storage, that second crop because they'll take the first crop that they come off of corn. That's what they use for food, and the second crop they'll usually use for export, and that's the one that China goes in and buys and whatever else. So they're kind of keeping an eye on that. And right now, the region from well, basically the far western central part of it is where their corn and everything like that is. A lot of their corn, not all of it, of course. Um, but it's had some decent rains. Been looking really good. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty bumper crop. So, and right now we're in the harvest of wheat and everything like that right now. we've had some difficulties getting wheat out of the field right now, just because of all the degum storms we've been having through, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, over into here. I mean, in the past 3 days, we've got 4.5 inches of rain here in Mobile. So we've had a lot of moisture, and right now they usually got, 25, close to 30% of the wheat out of the field in Oklahoma. They got 5%. So they just can't get out there and get it out right now. So now they're trying to figure out, well, what's the crop going to be? Even though it's got some good water over there, just kind of what it's going to be. So, I mean, that's the one thing I had, like I said, I hadn't dug through that World Ag Supply Report yet, but we'll kind of thumb through it this evening and kind of see what it has to say. It's a very, very long report, but if you just read the first 3 or 4 pages, you'll get a pretty good gist of what's going on. The rest of it's just tables and numbers and all that good stuff. So, um, but really, I think from there, markets right now still trying to push higher. The S&P is right now almost exactly 100 points above its year open. Got above the year open. Nasdaq was the first one, but right now is still trying to get, over that 100-point level. It hit it exactly day before yesterday and backed up. Then it kind of popped up a little bit above there, overnight, stuff like that. So we'll see if they can continue to push the S&P on up. The Dow was down today. It's perked back up a little bit here. Uh, I am. Let's go to here. This will kind of give you a better definition of that. They were getting slammed right in here this morning early. This is the Dow futures. Even at the open, they kind of pushed down a little bit. Now the S&P and the Nasdaq kind of drug it back up. But Boeing, I guess, had a plane over in India that crashed and burned off of takeoff or something like that. I think it killed like 225 people. It was pretty nasty. That really hit Boeing pretty hard. Uh, Here, there's the what is that, 20-point gap down, and of course you can see they kind of popped back up here a little bit, but Boeing got beat up on that being in the Dow, and there's only 30 stocks in the Dow. Kind of hurt the Dow a little bit. Even though they moved back up here a little, they've gotten about half of it back. So we'll see if they can uh, see what happened. It might have been pilot error. It could be a billion different things when it comes to an airplane, or it could just be going back to what we saw with Boeing a couple of years ago, right? So, but I guess they're still having issues and stuff like that. But that's kind of what beat up the Dow earlier today, and it has tried to recover a little bit, but kind of see what goes on from there. But with that, that's just kind of a round out of what we've got going on. Another thing, if you looked at jobless claims this morning, which I've been kind of expecting it to start, popping up a little bit, it's now starting to pop up a little bit. We had more jobless claims than expected. That's initial jobless claims, and the continuous jobless claims are actually staying a little higher. We're actually above the 4-week average on both of them. So with all the layoffs that we've been seeing, not only in the federal government, but across a bunch of companies and stuff like that, it's starting to show up in the jobless claims. So it'll be interesting to see what that's doing, how that's sustained. There's still a bunch of jobs out there. Look at the JOLTS numbers. They're still real high, which are the job openings. Even the non-farm payrolls were still pretty good. I mean, 140,000 or whatever it was. But that was last month, not this month. I'm kind of anxious to kind of see how the jobs are doing, with all the companies slash government just kind of shoveling people out and seeing if they're going out and getting something else, or they're just sitting back on their haunches taking, government payouts or whatever it may be. So, but anyway, with that, I've got really kind of nothing else off the top of my head, unless you all have any questions, specific questions or anything like that. Uh, Gold's back above 3,400. We were hanging on that 3,350 for the past several days, and now they kind of popped it up last night. We'll see if it continues to move on up and kind of go from there. So, but with that, Um, we'll round things up, be here on Tuesday. Next Thursday, we have a holiday. Let me just say this very quickly. Markets are closed and everything like that for, I guess it's called Juneteenth. So with that, we won't be having a market radar then, but we will be back on Tuesday, kind of see how the weekend went and if Iran and U.S. really did talk or anything like that, and kind of go from there. How long do I expect the oil surge to continue? I wouldn't. I mean, I mean, in theory, we've got until Sunday so far to see if they're going to talk. If not, you're probably going to see more unrest, is my guess. They might just say, no, we're not showing up, which will kind of spook oil that much more. Wouldn't surprise if we don't, get through next week, especially if that happens. And it might continue to move on. I mean, you really got a combination of things there, Barry. The you got oil producers here kind of cutting back anyway. One thing I'm starting to kind of keep my eye on is the Baker Hughes rig count that comes out every Friday. If you go to investing.com, just look at their economic news, look at Friday right around noon, 1 o'clock, something like that. You'll see a Baker Hughes rig count. Right now it's hanging right around 550. Uh, it's we're booming if we get above 700 on that rig count. If it gets below 500, they're really skinning back. So that's one thing I'm kind of keeping an eye on, see if that number's starting to decrease. And if that's the case, that means there's less rigs, less production. Therefore, crude oil is going to probably push up along with that as well. So that's just kind of the local um, U.S. kind of look at things. At the other side of it, you've got even OPEC saying in August they're going to start decrease in production, even though they've been increasing production. And of course, you got the sanctions on Russia right now, and now you got this unrest between Iraq and Iran and U.S. and all that good stuff. Heck, they want to dismantle Israel, which not like that's going to happen. Um, and just so they can bomb them some more, whatever. They don't like that, and of course, the oil markets are going to get a little jittery off that. So I think you've got more um, uh, upside, momentum on crude right now than downside, even though Trump wants to drill, baby, drill, right? So that's the big other side of it. But right now, I think the oil industry is more probably oil is going to be going up to at least 70, maybe even $75, as opposed to we're going down to $45. So I think we've got some time here. Nothing goes straight up. Just remember that. So it'll go up and probably pull back a little bit and go up. And we were at $69 earlier this morning. They pulled it back to around 68. But I think we'll continue to try to push on higher on crude. You're going to have resistance at 70. Above that, probably right around 72 to 73 somewhere. And if they can get above 75, everybody's radar will be going off then. So, but that's kind of the way it looks. Right now, I think we got a good week or two on crude of it continue to holding its strength. Now, if all of a sudden Iran agrees to everything with what Trump's saying and they go back and just humble themselves, I'm sure oil will start flowing again. Crude will come back down. So we just have to be kind of real careful as we kind of move forward just to kind of see where things are. So I doubt that's going to happen, but you never know. So, yeah. And I think we can probably I mean, we were looking to see if we can get, that up to around 77 to, 79 in there somewhere. And I think it can make it 77, 78, something like that. I think it'll make it before we have too much time, problem in there. And those trades usually last about a week to 2 weeks. And that's why I kind of did that. So right now we're looking pretty good on that. So, I mean, we're doing real well on it right now. I think it's up about 80, $90 a contract at this point in time, so it looks pretty good. So, alrighty, we'll wrap things up, come back on Tuesday and see where things are at and go from there. So, but thanks for tuning in. You all have a great and wonderful weekend. If you're traveling, be safe, and we'll see you Tuesday.